Mythos has got some serious competition now, and that is OpenAI Daybreak.
So this is their actual direct version of Mythos. It's effectively a really good hacking machine. So that whole nice 90-day grace period where everyone has time to work is being destroyed. We're seeing that in real time. If this paradigm continues, we're going to have fully agentic bug finder, bug triager, bug patcher. Humans are going to still be in the loop for now, but I anticipate a day where they won't be. The pattern of 100 agents is able to beat Mythos is shocking. If you can get into these very sensitive systems, you can encrypt the system, and then you can effectively blackmail the company and say, I have all your data. I have all your customers' data. I want you to pay me $10 million in Bitcoin, and I'll go away. You'll never see me again. And that works. That's a multi-billions of dollars every year is lost from these people.
I'm Lior from Exploring ChatGPT, and I'm joined by Chris.
I'm Chris. I run Toxic.com, former NSA, currently working in big tech.
Never leave out that you're a former NSA.
It's a good
Actually,
hook.
though, I wasn't trying to be sly with that. You should say that every time. Mythos has got some serious competition now, and that is OpenAI Daybreak. So, Chris, what do we got on this?
Yeah. Okay. So Daybreak. I will say, cool name. I think a little bit ago we had they came out with Mythos and then OpenAI came out with Spud. So
Yeah.
it kind of feels like maybe they learned their lesson, go for the hype names. I am a fan of this one. So this is their actual direct version of Mythos. So OpenAI. So I think it's been about 6 or 7 weeks since Mythos released. Quick primer for everyone who's not familiar. I don't know how you couldn't be, but just in case, it's Anthropic's ultra premium model that specifically targets cyber use cases. So it's effectively a really good hacking machine, right? They released it through something called Glasswing, Project Glasswing. And they specifically did that because they felt it was too capable to release generally. OpenAI did a couple of follow-ups. They had their ChatGPT 5.5 Cyber, and they started doing a similar thing where they had a controlled release, but it was still relatively open. So what Daybreak is their official response to Project Glasswing, where now you have OpenAI saying that they're with tweaking the guardrails and coming up with their newest model, they also feel like it's powerful enough to not be generally released. And they did release some benchmarks, and they're roughly the same as Mythos. It outperformed Mythos in a couple areas, and it underperformed Mythos in a couple areas, but it's plus or minus 2%. So it's a little surprising they're not getting as big in the hype cycle because their Project Daybreak is legitimately good. We're seeing early adoption from a lot of vendors, a lot of the big names, Cisco, CrowdStrike, AWS, all these big vendors are also now participating in Daybreak. I think that's interesting because it shows nobody's picking a side. I think we're early enough where people are still trying to avoid vendor lockout, and we're really seeing them adopt both these programs. Yeah, what are your thoughts on OpenAI and their posturing here?
I think like you mentioned, it's nice to see that people aren't taking sides here. And I think that us as individuals should probably do the same. Because when you look at the corporate level, you mentioned CrowdStrike, for example, like they're just going to use whatever's best and probably maybe a combination of different models. So maybe Mythos is, like you said, it was a 2% differential. So overall strength, difference is inconsequential, but maybe Daybreak is better at this and then Mythos is better at that. And so we're going to use Mythos for that and on Daybreak for this. So I like the direction it's heading in terms of the corporate level. And I think that as individuals, we should probably do the same. It kind of gets into that conversation of like, how many subscriptions do you really want to have? But at the same time, like most people's use cases could be performed by really any model anyways. We're not Most of us aren't hackers like you, Chris. You're a cybersecurity expert is probably a nicer way to state it. I don't know, like in the cybersecurity world, is it bad to call somebody a hacker?
No, I self-identify as one, even on my little profile.
Okay.
If you do any red teaming, if you're on the mischievous side, it's not like a slur or anything. We use it
Okay.
as a badge of honor.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm definitely not a hacker and the furthest thing from a cybersecurity expert. But yeah, it seems like at that more technical level, like you're gonna be more aware of if you're somebody that has used Mythos and you work in big tech, then you would probably know, okay, Mythos is good for this, Daybreak is good for that. we're gonna have access to both, so might as well give them both a shot.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Even now, I have subscriptions to both, and it's hard because if you, like, just put into words told me to put into words, it's difficult to. But there are just some tasks that just come up in my daily workflow, my instinct is to go use ChatGPT or to go use Claude. I just feel it's like a vibe thing. You just get better results from one or the other. So I think we'll see the same thing at this level because at the end of the day, we're not only seeing the difference in the model, but the model's only one layer, right? I could even see a world where we actually converge on the model itself because you chase the path of least resistance, the most effective models, the way the models get more and more capable, but it's very similar. Like right now, we're at plus or minus 2%. It's pretty good. But the difference is the harness. So OpenAI, Anthropic, we had the big Claude code leak, but nobody really has good eyes on what OpenAI is doing and how they're harnessing their model. Yeah, well, we'll see. I did want to set a little bit of the stage for some of the new people on why this matters and where we're going. Project Daybreak is specifically, I'll say, kind of trying to split how they're doing it. So they want their defensive use case very similar to Mythos. But what they're also doing is pretty interesting. The old paradigm on let's say like finding bugs, right? Is you have a security researcher and they spend effectively months going over a program or a project looking for vulnerabilities. Eventually, they'll find one. It's hard to do, so you would typically need, let's say, 6 or 7 years in the industry to regularly find them. But then you submit a triage package. So you basically say what happened, how to replicate it, and then answer any questions you might see, and then you submit that to the team who maintains it. Then they spend weeks, if not months, triaging it. They have to find the where is in the code. They have to see if they can replicate the vulnerability to see if what you discovered was a one-off or if it's like it can be repeated. And then they actually have to spend time developing a patch. So this whole cycle actually up until just recently took a lot of time from the researcher to the submission to triage to patching. So what the cybersecurity community did is we basically decided that we're going to give a window from when a researcher discovers the vulnerability to when they're allowed to put it on X or basically broadcast it and take credit for their discovery. The very aggressive programs, that was 90 days. So I could find a bug on Firefox. The team, once I disclose it, the team has 90 days to patch it. And the reason they did that is because that 90 days gives the team a head start to get the defenses up. And even if the patch isn't quite ready, that 90-day head start was enough to make sure that by the time somebody could, like, by the time I talk about it, let's say you have a threat actor, right? Somebody's, oh, I can weaponize that. It would still take them weeks or months of developing that code to turn it into a weapon to attack. So the math basically worked out to if you have 90 days from when it's discovered to when you tell the team about it to when you broadcast it online, that would give everyone enough time to be safe. So you can still take credit for your work and the team has time to fix. But what we're seeing lately is that paradigm is just gone out the window. A couple episodes ago, we talked about how quickly we're finding these now. And basically, by the time you find these vulnerabilities, which is greatly sped up with AI, so now we're finding more vulnerabilities than ever. These bug bounty teams that do the triaging are basically underwater. They're weeks, if not months behind because so many people are just flooding them with all these new vulnerabilities. We've never seen anything like this before. And then people, the attackers, as one of our stories we'll talk about today, they're starting to use AI to actually weaponize these things. So that whole nice 90-day grace period where everyone has time to work is being destroyed. We're seeing that in real time. So what Daybreak did, which I'm a big fan of this, is they actually have an automated researcher to find bugs. So it's a bug finding agent, and then they have a triage agent, and they have a patch developer agent. So it's not just one agent, let's say Mythos, where the company gets access to that and then they do what they want and they harness it however they want. What OpenAI is doing is they're putting a little bit of effort into this to make it actually a complete little package where it finds the bugs, remediates the bugs, it patches the bugs. Now, the one thing is they're not confident enough for it to automatically merge that patch, so that new code into production. So there's still human in the loop. But when you use their service, effectively you can just let it go wild on your code base. And what you'll get in the end is just a patch that basically says, this is how you fix your code. Now have a human review it and implement it, which is great. So if this paradigm continues, we're going to have fully agentic bug finder, bug triager, bug patcher. Humans are going to still be in the loop for now, but I anticipate a day where they won't be. It's a big change.
Wow. So basically, just to break that down, if I understood correctly, and this is in real time as we speak. So there used to be this 90-day kind of disclosure model,
Mhm.
right? And now and maybe it's not gone completely, but it's almost gone at this point. And now you just have the AI driven vulnerability discovery going on left and right. So we kind of have to rethink as humans, what does the future of cybersecurity actually look like in this AI driven world, right? So I guess if you could just note a couple things here before we move on to the next story, like what is obviously you mentioned the three agents within Daybreak. So what's the main difference between Daybreak and Mythos?
Yeah, Mythos is still much more exclusive. So there's much less eyes and hands on Mythos. That might be changing as other models and other companies are catching up. But as of right now, Mythos is still much more exclusive. There's only 40 companies or so that have access to that.
Plus one
Um,
Discord group.
yeah, yeah. Plus the Discord group and maybe China and
Maybe
Russia.
yeah, Russia, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. Yeah, if you missed that, watch one of our previous episodes. A Discord group was able to access Mythos for a month and
Yeah.
no one noticed, including Anthropic. A third party journalist had to tell Anthropic, oh, just so you know, there's some kids accessing Mythos for the last month.
Yikes.
Rough. So any company can sign up for Daybreak now. You do have to go through some verification steps and all that, but they're being less exclusive. So I'd say one of the biggest differences is exclusivity. And I will say with both of these products, the one thing that the one red flag that a lot of security folks mention is that when they're talking about all these benchmarks and all these great things that's happening is nobody's talking about false positives. And false positives is something that's we deal with, right? And anyone who's pointed an AI at a code base and said, find all the bugs, right? Make no mistakes. It will come back with a bunch of bugs. But if you look through the business logic of the code or you look at where the modules are in the infrastructure of the code, nobody could actually exploit those or basically hallucinated the problem. So that's a false positive. And a lot of people are submitting false positives to these triage teams and it's weighing them down. And I do believe that both Mythos and Daybreak are guilty of this too. They will find every single vulnerability, but 20% of the stuff they find is also not a vulnerability. So if they're writing code to patch something that's not broken, that will introduce bugs itself. So there's a little bit of don't buy too much of the hype. This is a change in paradigm, but the fact that nobody's saying, oh, yeah, zero false positives, it's a red flag for sure.
That's an interesting point. So I think to roll into the next story here, again, in comparison to Mythos, which was the best thing on the block. So now we got MDASH.
Yeah.
And MDASH is basically Microsoft's 100 agent vulnerability scanner. They built it internally and it beats everyone on the public leaderboard. So, what is MDASH? Did Microsoft finally do something special here? Remove
Finally.
themselves from Copilot, and what do we got?
Yeah, well, I was speaking a little bit earlier about harnesses. So for anyone who doesn't quite get what a harness is, it's all of the code around the model itself. But when you're using Claude Code is a harness. It does a million things like memory management, session management. It remembers certain things you like, you don't like. All those things happen behind the scenes. And you tell it to code something, sometimes you get one agent and sometimes you get five agents. Those kind of decisions are made by the harness. So harness has we've been talking about it. It's been a buzzword for about a month, but this is Microsoft's harness. And I think it might be one of the biggest news stories that's not getting a ton of coverage because it actually shows that the model is only one point. It's just one part of the overall product. And the classic wisdom was basically improve the model, improve the product. And now we're starting to see as people are developing these harnesses just how good of an improvement you can do. So one of the big things we measure Mythos on is called CyberGym, and it scored 83% on CyberGym. 2 months ago when Mythos first came out, that was mind blowing. The fact that anything could score that high on CyberGem meant that this thing was a monster at finding vulnerabilities in code, at dealing with command line, at just basically like the operator level stuff. And what we see here with MDASH is Microsoft pushing 88%. So effectively, they were able to beat Mythos in terms of performance on CyberGym, which is huge, right? If Anthropic is sitting there effectively saying, "Hey, we came up with this product. It's too dangerous to release into the wild. You can't have it," and Windows was able to beat that, that's quite impressive. But that's compounded by the fact that they're not using ultra modern frontier models here. So Microsoft built this harness that's using models that you and I could access to effectively be a better cyber operator than Mythos. So
Wow.
there's a lot to unpack right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say that Microsoft's using models that we have access to, could anybody build something like this?
Yes. Yeah. This real quick, this was from a team that was not originally in Microsoft. They joined Microsoft because they were making these little harnesses and they were using models that anyone could access and they were winning competitions. So Microsoft saw that, they paid attention to them, they brought these guys on board. And this is their like the result of their internal tooling.
Well,
Yeah, it's super impressive.
so it seems to be just when we thought we have the best thing, we realized maybe we're doing this all wrong. Instead of just having one model, one security model, and saying, this is it, we did it. Actually, we need multi agent cybersecurity models, and those will outperform. So I wonder what down the road what this looks like. Does it just get better and better when you add more agents, or
Uh,
how does it really look?
so that is, I think that's the question of our time. That's probably going to be one of the biggest engineering questions to answer, right? In this case, you mentioned 100 agents. This, to be clear, it's not a single use case. This is like a whole triage pipeline. So you have what Microsoft did is they grabbed agents anyone can use and they gave them very specific system prompts. So each agent has a very specific job and then they all talk to each other. So here we have like scanners that find flaws in code. And then you have separate agents who are prompted almost adversarially. Hey, this agent thinks he found a flaw in the code. It's your job to go prove him wrong. And then if he can't prove him wrong, then he moves it forward. You have this third stage where now you have one agent who found the bug, one agent that proved that, okay, yeah, I guess it is a bug. And then you have the next agent that now tries to patch the bug or another agent who tries to replicate the bug. Another agent who like so you just have this effectively this is an agentic swarm. You have 100 agents all given access to this set of code and each one has its very specialized job. And then you have like layers of that. So at the first level you have a bunch of agents dealing with the code. And then above that you have agents that are having conversations with each other. And then above that you have agents that are orchestrating where all the agents are going. So it really is like this hierarchical swarm of agents. And it's been theoretical for a while. People have had 10 agents working together. But the pattern of 100 agents is able to beat Mythos is shocking. Like that, I think it's a big deal. They even to test some of this out, Microsoft purposely created a 21 planted vulnerabilities that were supposed to be super hard to find, where other models could not find them, and a model by itself could not find them. But the agentic swarm was able to find 21 out of 21 of these.
Oh, okay. So maybe we just go from 100 to 1,000 to a million, and then we get 100% on CyberGym. But we always talk about what can go wrong with agents. And so, what's the risk in adding more and more agents here? And also, like, if you have 100 agents, does that mean that everyone has a separate specific task, or are they working in teams towards the same goal? And then what happens when they drift off and do their own thing, and what type of problems can that
So
cause?
I think the cybersecurity professional in me recognizes you asked a really good question, and you were asking like, what's the risk of introducing more agents? Because you're right. Every agent you add effectively increases the risk because you're increasing the attack surface, you're increasing agentic drift possibilities, depending on where they get their data, depending on where to get their information. Like you have to secure every single agent. every single instance. So absolutely. I also would question the scalability of this. One agent costs a lot of money to run. 100 agents costs 100 times the amount to run. So yeah, maybe we could max out with 1,000 agents, but like there has to be some like line where you have a certain number of agents before you start to get like decreasing results, like the effectiveness of that. But I don't know if we found that yet. I like my initial thoughts would never have been to use 100 agents. I would think once you're pushing 25 agents, it's what are you doing? And the fact that they just came out with 100, to be fair, Microsoft has the cash to burn to show that the solution works, but I also don't see a world where, like, we're packaging a 1,000 agent swarm and just sending that out everywhere because most companies aren't gonna be able to afford that. So, I think it's interesting. It's an absolutely great question. I think
Yeah.
that this is, like, the questions to ask right now. So what's risk analysis, cost effectiveness? This goes beyond just cybersecurity into a lot of business decisions and leaderships. Like, if you're, like, the CISO, you're in charge not just of the security, but also your leadership in the business. Can you justify spending that much cash burn?
Yeah. I think, like, obviously for Microsoft, 100 agents is like a little write-off, right?
Mm.
I guess that really comes back to who's got the money, who's sitting on the cash, which is when I asked you, like, could anybody do this? Yeah, technically, yeah. Monetarily, no. Joe Schmo down the road can't do this, but Microsoft has no issue. But even when we talk about these big companies, it's yeah, Microsoft has no issue, but would OpenAI and Anthropic have an issue doing this? Maybe, because they're already burning so much cash that it just doesn't make sense. They're burning cash they don't have. They're just basically just swallowing up venture capital at like incredible rates. So I think that actually, and we haven't heard anything on Google's end in terms of cybersecurity. So I wonder if they're doing something behind closed doors right now and just waiting, coming to theaters near you soon or something like that.
I fully agree, and I'm still, like, of the position that, like, of the safest AI vendors out there, Google is still up there, but, yeah, they don't post anything. Like, I can't remember the last time there was, like, market hype about a model or anything like that. I will say they are a Project Glasswing partner, and we do have a story of Google, like, later here, but in terms of just, like, the model on what is Google doing with this, it's pretty lackluster. I also think it's very interesting that Microsoft is also a Glasswing partner. So Microsoft has access to Mythos. So this team could have used Mythos but chose not to. Maybe just to demonstrate the strength of their platform. But the platform they made is not model dependent. So in theory, they could end up hot swapping this out and using 100 Mythos agents. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll move on and we'll get to chats later. So stick around. If you're leaving chats in here, appreciate it. We'll get to them. So this one is a Dune reference for those of you that know Dune. And I had to ask Chris, how do I pronounce this? And he's maybe like this. So try not to go too hard on me in the comments later on if you're watching on YouTube. Minishai-Hulud. Fun names. We always come out with Chris. Thank you so much for coming with these topics. It's every time it's like the names are nuts. We had Solid Gold Magikarp, and then we had this and that. Now we got Minishai-Hulud. So hopefully I'm pronouncing that. Yeah, what is this, Chris?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and a little quick backdrop. Dune references are prolific in the cybersecurity community. There's a really good book for anybody who wants to understand Russian like malware teams, ransomware, called Sandworm, which is a Dune reference. So yeah, Shai-Hulud. It's basically just been a running trope for a decade or more. Just the kind of people who are interested in cybersecurity love Dune for some reason, myself included. So we've talked about something similar a couple of times where effectively what this is a supply chain attack. So again, a quick primer on that. If I have a product, no product these days is built in isolation. You basically use other people's code. So the first thing you do is called bootstrap a project. So you basically get it started and then you immediately import hundreds, if not thousands of libraries. Those libraries are updated and maintained by other people. So I'll write something that solves a problem. And then that problem is think of it like a Lego block. So when I want to create a new platform, a new project, I don't build it all from scratch. I just get all the Lego blocks that I need. and then I build my product, right? Everybody does this. There's no product we're using right now that's like you've built in isolation. This is just how the software engineering community works. You build with Lego blocks. What this happened here is they are effectively able to grab one of those Lego blocks and poison it. So I'm going to explain it in a simple but still complex way, but we'll get through it. So effectively, there's a library out there called TanStack, and they are on GitHub. So you can see their code. Anybody can read it, and anybody can contribute to it. If you thought you could do something really cool and improve the product, you basically pull the code down, you'd make the change, and then you do a pull request. So the owner of that product gets eyes on the changes you made, and it's up to their discretion, but they can look and be like, oh, that's a really cool update. I want my product to be able to do that. This guy did it for me, right? So he'll pull it. What happens these days is what's called a CI/CD pipeline, and it's basically a way to continuously integrate code instead of having to do these big rebuilds. In this pipeline, we run a lot of security checks, and we basically get the code prepared. There's a lot of technical stuff, but what matters is GitHub operates this on your behalf, right? So what the attackers did is they did a pull request and they basically abused the mechanics of the way we update and write code. They were able to put poison in one of their caches. So when the real maintainer later released the newest version of the code, it was already poisoned. So the maintainer of this code accidentally, with, without his knowledge, released basically a poisoned Lego block. So now you have thousands of companies around the world who, when they see that update, they pull it into their code repository. So effectively, thousands of companies across the world all pulled in this like poisoned Lego block and then got hit. What's interesting about this is that the tan stack actually didn't do anything wrong. Usually I can point to like something like, oh, you should have caught that. You didn't run a code scan. This was obviously malicious. But the way the attackers did this, like nobody could have caught it. So they didn't have to like steal credentials, they didn't have to phish. TanStack trusted the system and the system failed. What's interesting about this is they even had two-factor authentication. They basically, if I were to review their stuff, I'd be like, yeah, you're good. And they still got popped, right? And the downstream effects of this are pretty big. If anyone uses like Mistral AI, Guardrails AI, OpenSearch, all these companies, they got hit. And I think the biggest one is OpenAI themselves. So two employees at OpenAI actually got hit here. And what was compromised there was what we call a code signing certificate, which is a pretty big deal. Effectively, when someone at OpenAI wants to write code or they want to change or they want to push, they're not open source. So only very specific people, and you have to have the certificate. But if that certificate is breached, if I steal that certificate, that means I could actually write code and then push it. So I there was a chance that somebody could have wrote code and pushed it into OpenAI's system and effectively poisoned OpenAI. Luckily, this was caught. Within 20 minutes, a couple of people noticed that something was off. They put out a big announcement and got caught. Now, there's still hundreds of companies probably that are still running this poison build because if they're not super on top of their game, they still pulled it, they still installed it. So it was patched and released, but if your build cycle is every 3 weeks, they're going to be running a poisoned build up for 3 weeks. This is live right now. Some companies are going to get hit. Data is going to be exfiltrated. But a couple of the big companies like are aware of it and they were able to recycle their certificates and protect themselves. Is that making sense overall?
That makes sense 100%.
All
So
right.
I kind of want to ask two things. So how does that relate to Dune? Mini Shai-Hulud. And then what exactly were these two employees at OpenAI doing that they got hit? Yeah.
Yeah, no, first of all, great question. So that basically you have Dune, which is most famous for a couple things. It's spice and the sandworms, right? So the sandworms are effectively the giant worms that go through the sand, but they're a worm. And effectively, what this was also a worm. So the type of malware that they decided to poison that Lego block with was a worm. And in this case, that worm actually commits copies of itself back into the maintainer's repo. Super interesting. Anyone who vibe codes and you push your stuff onto GitHub, you'll see a little icon showing you. but you'll also see a little icon showing like Claude if you use Claude code. So it's a way to signal that yes, you pushed this code, but also this was AI helped. And that's effectively what happens is there's about 17 lines of code that gets pushed and they actually spoof it under Claude. So it doesn't look like malware. It just looks like somebody used Claude code. So if I have a project and I relied on their project, I bring it in. Even if I like eventually fix it or like I update the next patch, there's a worm in there where it self replicates into my repo. And then my repo will be spreading the same malware. So whenever you have a piece of malware that spreads itself through some medium without the need for human interaction, that very specific type of malware is called a worm. We have a thousand different names. There's differences between like viruses and worms, for example. Worm just means it's effectively self-spreading. That's why we're seeing the Dune reference from the sandworm.
Okay.
What was the first question?
And then what were these 2 OpenAI employees actually doing that they got hit?
So they were builders, right? They're software engineers. Their job, OpenAI didn't specifically say like where they worked or what they worked, but they were building some piece of code. When you work for a big tech company, you get your own laptop, you get your own permissions, you're assigned to a team, and your team will work on a project. It just so happens that these 2 employees, their project relied on this library, Tanstack, and Tanstack got poisoned.
Okay,
So it's basically just a matter of circumstance that they're because they relied on that project, they pulled it in just as it got poisoned, and there was no indicators of compromise to say anything was wrong. So it just made its way into the build, and then it compromised their code signing certificates.
interesting.
Good response, good, very fast response, but yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And then, before we hop into Google here, just one more question about this. So, like, you mentioned two-factor authentication, which I do
Mhm.
across the board for, like, almost everything that I have, and, like, clearly that and you mentioned, like, "Yeah, you're good, like, you got it. You got 2FA, you're good." Like, what does this really say about is that enough now?
Yeah, this effectively, and I don't wanna, like, fearmonger, but no. This isn't something like the 2 OpenAI employees could have prevented, because what we're seeing in 2026 is supply chain attacks, right? If you order the newest iPhone and before it gets to your house, I intercept that package and I change a chip out and then I send you the iPhone. You can lock it down and you can secure it and you can have the facial identification and your password. You can do everything right. But at the end of the day, the actual components that build up the phone is poisoned. So there's going to be some time in the day it's going to send a signal with your passwords or data or credit cards, right? That's a hardware level supply chain attack. This is a software level supply chain attack. So the very components that our software is built on is under attack. And I think AI is making the difference here because I've like there's like internal messaging boards and it's meme worthy. There's like memes of just like people just okay, another day, another supply chain attack. This if 2026 has a cybersecurity thing other than Mythos and Daybreak, it's the fact that we're like attacking supply chain at industrial level scale. Because if I want to hack the front page of Google, it's effectively impossible. They have the best cybersecurity professionals in the world. They can withstand Russia, North Korea, China attacking them. But I don't have to hack like Google. I can go find the lowest fruit on the tree and then attack that. I can find somewhere where they rely on someone who creates code who doesn't follow best practices. And when you're importing literally thousands and thousands of libraries, because that's the increases the attack surface to thousands. And you just got to find one guy who messed up. And in this case, it wasn't even he didn't even mess up. Like it was a good project. It's just a new paradigm. Yeah. So this wasn't something that like I could be like, oh, they should have had 2FA, right? This just relies on okay, this is what happened. We have to detect it. We have to respond, and we have to be ready for the next one because it's going to be on the way.
Yeah. So in terms of the next one, we have a first one here. Google has a first confirmed AI-built zero-day. We've spoken about 0 days before, so I'd like you to just for those people that don't know, what is a 0 day? And what's the significance of this being the first AI built 0 day?
Yeah. So a 0 day gets its name because we basically mark when a piece of malware was created by a specific day. So the day it was discovered, it gets a marker. 0 day is a clever way of saying somebody knows about this vulnerability, but they haven't disclosed it and it hasn't been seen in the wild. That's what day zero. So effectively, think of it as like a cyber weapon that's never been used before. The moment you use it, other cybersecurity professionals can see all of a sudden there's a virus or there's malware or there was a hack, and then they can react. They can find the code, they can see what was wrong with the code, they can create a patch and go on and so forth. But if nobody knows the vulnerability exists except for the hacker, they're basically said to have a 0 day. 0 days typically are very difficult to create. And if you can find a 0 day, bug bounty programs actually pay you a lot of money. There's a very popular one called XSS, and you find one of those and you might make $500 or you might make $16,000. It depends where you find it and the downstream effects of it. Some of these 0 days can go up for $100,000.
Wow.
Yeah, because what you can do with it is very destructive and you can make a lot of money illegally. So you have to be able to incentivize these people to come forward with it so the companies can patch. So it's effectively an arms race. Like, we have people looking for 0 days. We have looking to people who try to patch and prevent. What we're seeing here, though, is we've speculated a lot in the past where people are going to start to use AI to create that asymmetric warfare on the red team, where they start to be able to create attacks. Right. This is but this is the first officially confirmed one end to end by Google. So it's not just like the theory anymore. This was a 0 day discovered and written by AI. In this one, it actually does bypass 2FA. So this was well discovered. There's a little bit of a mystery around how it was discovered. We can just say that the team at Google was very good. They have threat hunters that are looking for stuff like this, and they caught it. This malware effectively was about to go live, and Google isn't releasing the name of what tool it was targeting to protect them, but it was a tool that most of us use. So a tool that most of us use had a flaw in it that would also bypass two-factor authentication and breach. So it could have affected me and you and anyone listening. But Google was really sharp. They found it first. They notified the vendor who was able to ship the patch with the help of Google before it actually went live. So lucky for everybody, like the team at Google knew what they were doing, but it was what we call the post-mortem. So after the fact, we looked through the malware and the team basically determined like effectively this is the very first one that was AI. And it's funny because it has like anybody who's done vibe coding would recognize the same things. Typically, when you write a piece of malware, you try to write it very small and condensed and you obfuscate it. So what you do is you remove comments, you shift things around, you try to make it as hard to understand as possible so it can stay effective, right? And that's not what we saw here. So the fun part of the story is we saw overly like helpful, positive, explanatory comments that basically read exactly like a tutorial explaining to the developer how the malware works. We saw this textbook Python structure that matches like anybody who's written code, LLMs write it in a certain pattern. We saw hallucinations in the code, and then we saw like a bunch of like quality of life things that would make the whoever's operating the malware like happy. Like it just was like, oh yeah, you deserve to have a nice interface too. No one who writes ransomware where does that, right? They're the people who like live and breathe in C++ or assembly code. They don't care about the user interface or anything like that. So with all these markers, but from like start to finish, the Google team was effectively able to say that this was it. This was the very first end to end 0 day created by an AI application.
Wow. So it's what's interesting to me about this story is where you mentioned that if you're somebody that knows code, you could tell that
Mhm.
this 0 day was AI built. But the funny thing about that is, I don't know if you saw recently the CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei. He, I forgot which year he said this was going to be. He might have said next year that 100% of code is going to be AI written. I could be wrong about the year. So at what point does AI written code become where you can't tell the difference anymore. Like, for example, like in AI writing, it's gotten so good where you can't tell the difference a lot of the times unless you're really in this world. Like a side tangent, I'm very transparent about how I write my articles. I do use AI to help me write them. Parts of them are written by me, parts are written by AI. And it's well known at this point that AI detectors don't work. If they do work and you ran my articles through them, they would probably show 0 to 5%, where that's not the case. So and obviously there's probably not code detectors unless I'm maybe out of that world and I don't know to know if code was written by AI. But like you mentioned earlier, like on GitHub, if somebody put some code out there and then it's got a little Claude icon
Hmm.
next to them, and there's an interesting chat that we'll answer from Will Tie in regards to that in terms of liability. But so do we reach a point where we can't tell the difference?
So yeah, I think there will be a day, but definitely not today.
Okay.
I so first of all, like the AI writing thing, I think that's a super interesting question because last year there was a bunch of obvious tells, right? Because that's not just X, that's Y, prolific use of a big M dash. There's very obvious patterns AI writing. Slowly that's going away because the AI companies get feedback and then they change the system prompt and then they make little changes so it starts to sound a little more natural without you having to say sound natural. But I think a secondary effect is also there's so much AI writing that we're starting to get used to AI writing and our ability to it's like boiling a crab, right? Our ability to tell the difference is probably getting worse. Not to mention that the younger generation are probably growing up with AI writing. I've even seen like system prompts and stuff in textbooks where very obviously the author didn't mean to include a little chunk of the text where it follows up like, "Oh, did you want anything else?" So AI writing is making it way into everything we read. And the same effect is happening with code. I think the reason it's a little sharper to tell the difference in the code world is because AI writes very good documentation. It really explains itself. So you'll have a code snippet and then above you'll have a comment explaining the code and it'll be about the same length. So it really goes through and explains the code. In the real world, you would have one line and it'll be like this adds numbers. It's very brief because engineers are engineers for a reason. They didn't they didn't get an English major. So that's a big difference. Now, even if you're writing your own code, almost everybody is documenting that code with AI. So you'll write your function and be like, "Hey, Claude, document this, explain it." That way you don't have to waste hours doing that. So over time, I think we are going to hit that point where everyone's writing AI code, everyone's documenting it with AI. All the younger engineers, they're starting right off the bat, right? They're vibe coding their way through college, and I don't say that to shame them because I would do the same thing. It's just the new paradigm. This is how code is written, and this is how code is documented. So I do think we're going to hit the day where nobody knows the difference. I would still say it's a couple years away before all code is written AI, but that's absolutely the trend line for sure.
And then I guess just back to this 0 day real quick here, and just a general question about them. It's an open ended question. I don't know if there's a good answer to it. What's the point? Like, why is somebody creating these? What's their goal? Whether I say it's an open ended question because from my limited understanding, it almost seems I can almost compare it to if you're buying, let's say, an investment versus selling an investment. There's like a million reasons why you would sell your house, right? But there's only one reason why you'd buy it. And you, someone could be selling their house too because they're getting old or they're buying a new house or they got more kids and they got a dog and a cat or whatever. If you're
Mhm.
buying an investment, whether it's a house or a stock, like you're buying it for one purpose because you think it's a good investment. So, like
Yep.
in this case with the 0 day, if I'm making that comparison, the person that's building it versus the person that's finding it, right? And if I can make that comparison, like if you're building a 0 day, do you really only have one goal in mind?
I think that's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of, I guess, like this whole thing, right? There's effectively, from my point of view, there really is only a couple of reasons to build malware. The first one is because you can. There's a even dating back to the Morris worm, which is effectively like the first worm ever invented. There is a drive in some people in hackers that makes them wonder, are they technically proficient enough to do this? We do have a subset of hackers out there called gray hats who hack just for fun. So they look at a code bank and their mind sees it as a puzzle or as a challenge, and they will hack into a system. They will get to the point where they can read a database of credit cards, and then they'll just stop. They don't want the credit cards. They don't want to sell them. They don't want to profit. They just want to say, "Oh, can I do that? I bet I can. I bet I'm better than them." Right? That's the most innocent version. The next one is money. If you can get into these very sensitive systems, you can encrypt the system and then you can effectively blackmail the company and say, I have all your data. I have all your customers' data. I want you to pay me $10 million in Bitcoin and I'll go away. You'll never see me again. And that works. That's a multi billions of dollars every year is lost from these people. As a person, if you can do this just one time, you're set for life, right? You could go and retire to the Bahamas and never have to worry about it again. So the monetary incentive is amazing. So there's that. And then the last one is effectively doing it for nation state adversary uses, right? China does the distillation attacks. That's just one of many ways that China is trying to get into OpenAI system, right? And I can't say anything very specific here, but I can talk generally. China will create great candidates. They will send them to the United States. They will have them go to school. They will have them go through college. They will prepare them for a job interview. They'll get a job at someone like OpenAI, and then they'll have them work there for 2 or 3 years. And then one day they'll get a message and be like, "Hey, tell us everything what they're doing," right? That is not like theoretical. We actually see that r- more often than you'd think, right? So that's a real attack vector that happens. That's just one of many, though. Tries to hack in through supply chain attacks just like this. And in fact, that's actually a great point here. The Shai-Hulud worm. One of the things it does before it like launches into attack mode is it checks the environment, and it specifically checks for the Russian language. If it finds indicators of somebody using a Russian keyboard or some of the code was built by somebody who was Russian, it deactivates itself, right? So there is a protection mechanism where if for some reason this worm goes anywhere near Russia or any of the Baltic states, Russia agentic environment, it's harmless. It won't do anything, right? That's what we call an indicator, right? So when we trace back, okay, who made this worm? We know it was either Russia or a Russian sponsored threat actor or somebody who Russia will turn a blind eye towards as long as the malware won't hit Russia. This is actually it's really common, right? Because if Russia from a nation state, Russia is an adversary of the US. So if there's a company that's constantly being a thorn in the side to US companies, that's a benefit to Russia. So they have no incentive to shut down like these operations. So they'll just let it go. And so what these companies have figured out is okay, we can go and we can extort money from US companies by hacking them, but we will definitely get hit and we will get punished if we attack Russia. Effectively, that's the long answer. Effectively, it's either curiosity from a technical perspective, it's money, or it's information.
Wow. Okay. That is, yeah, pretty crazy. So maybe let's all be friends, guys.
Absolutely. I'm on board with that.
Yeah. All right. We'll get into a couple chats. We'll wrap it up and we'll go about our Saturdays here. So let's see. Will Ty, a guy on X posted that he had lost the password to his Bitcoin wallet that he had when he was in college. He uploaded some of his documentation to Claude Code and was able to retrieve his password. The Bitcoin in the wallet is worth at least $400,000.
Yeah, I read that post. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
I thought it was a fun story.
Yeah. I'm not the Bitcoin guy in this stream. Yeah. Good luck hacking into my Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. They probably got a cybersecurity on the level of Google, if I had to guess, with all the money they got.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then he asks, this was a good question here. Does the owner of the code that released it unknowingly have any liability? And this was in regards to that little Claude icon next
Mhm.
on GitHub. So what? That's an interesting one.
It is. So If I own a piece of code and it's open source, I release it. And what I typically do is I release it with a license. I've released a couple of these. I have one that called Slop Check. So anyone can download, a bunch of people already have. You run it and it checks for supply chain vulnerabilities for people who are doing what's called typo squatting, right? It's just a simple little tool. If that got compromised and then somebody who relies on my tool imported it and used it and then it popped them, I run it under an MIT license. So that license is actually in the GitHub page, and it serves as a waiver. And some of the words in there specifically say, "Hey, yeah, you can use this. You can use it for whatever you want." But I basically say I'm not responsible for what happens, and if anything happens from a downstream effect from me, I'm not responsible. So like using it at your own risk, right? It gets complicated. A lot of lawyers involved. Legal will always be involved with this, but effectively, if the owner of the code base does have a good, solid like disclosure saying use it at your own risk, for the most part, no, you won't be found liable because you didn't intentionally do this. I would argue that if you're the owner, which we do see, you own a good code base for 2 or 3 years, and then you purposely do something like that, we can definitely argue that you voided that agreement, the mutual trust of open source community, and they'll probably get lawyers involved, but generally speaking, you won't be liable.
All right, so good business idea here, guys. Don't really do this. Don't do this. Build an agent to find all the code on GitHub without the proper disclosures, and then download everything, and then sue everybody.
Just hope to get popped.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, it's been about an hour. We'll wrap it up here. First of all, thank you so much, Chris. As usual, we do these streams every week on Saturday. Before we do wrap up, should I have this ready? I'll put our YouTube channels in the chat. So there's my YouTube channel, and there is Chris. You can copy paste that into your browser, or if you're on mobile or something, just go to YouTube, type in Exploring ChatGPT Live, type in Toxec, Toxsec, go subscribe there. The streams are there, clips, all that fun stuff. If you're watching on YouTube and you're still here, appreciate it, and subscribe as well. Thank you to everybody in the chat. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, guys. Bye now.